Their money back and borrowers increasingly unable to repay it, the gloves are off. We were splashing it about in the good times, and so were the lenders. On average, every single British adult now owes almost £5,000 on credit cards, loans and overdrafts. The idea that that money belongs to somebody else and will have to be repaid at some point seems to have gone out of the window. Now, the lenders are struggling to tell the difference between those who can't pay and those who won't.
The two sides are squaring up. On one, the lenders who want their money back. They need it because they're desperately short of cash. On the other, us, the consumers. We've spent the money they offered, and if we can't pay it back, we're facing tougher tactics than ever before. But this is a story that cuts both ways.
Eliminate your debt. I was exactly there, guys. I had the credit cards, I had the loan agreements, I had the hire purchase, I had the mortgage.
A whole industry's emerged on the web, claiming it can find loopholes in the small print of our credit agreements.
Have you ever thought of taking your credit card providers to court to get them to legally write off your credit card debt? Some people have, and they have won their cases.
The message is, if you're prepared to challenge your lenders in court, you might just have them running for cover.
This is Credit Card News, and my name is iInterest Plastic.
The couple behind this site have led the way in legal actions.
Credit Card Killer offers you the opportunity to write off your credit card balance. That's right.
So when things were at their worst, what was your biggest level of debt?
It's over 100 and...
Just over 100,000.
About 120,000.
You don't know exactly?
It's not something you really like to look into that much detail. I think most people are the same. They avoid looking at their debt collection letters and things like that.
They had 13 credit cards, 4 loans, car finance and an overdraft.
Half of it was living expenses and half of it was the extras, the luxuries, the nicer things that ordinarily you couldn't afford unless you borrowed that money.
But their business failed, and they began to miss their monthly repayments.
It was then Basil and Amanda had an idea. They got hold of a copy of this, the Consumer Credit Act, and began trawling through it page by page. It lays out the rules for every purchase we make on credit in the UK, apart from our homes. Armed with this, they began looking for mistakes their creditors may have made in the paperwork, and then they took on their first lender.
I put together a bit of a letter to HSBC, thought I had everything correct, sent it off, then they wrote back after a few months and said, we're prepared to write the balance off.
How much have you managed to avoid paying back?
That was about £10,000 on HSBC
so you thought,
credit
we're onto
card.
something here.
HSBC said they wrote off the debt because they'd lost the original documents. Sir Roy Good is an eminent lawyer who knows the Act better than most. He was instrumental in its creation more than 30 years ago.
The rules relating to the formation of agreements are extremely complex. It is very easy for a creditor to make a little slip. Indeed, in some respects, some of the rules are not very clear. So any slip that is made entitles the consumer to refuse to pay unless the court gives leave to enforce the agreement.
Among the potential slips the Rankines were looking for, had the agreement been signed? Was the APR accurate and in the right place? Did the creditor actually have a copy of the agreement at all? Their tactics began to pay off.
Some would say they couldn't find a copy of the agreement, so they're prepared to write it off. Others would just say they're prepared to write it off without giving an explanation. They won't commit themselves and say, this is the point that was wrong.
There's reason for Basil and Amanda Rankine from Rugeley to celebrate. Basil successfully challenged 6 banks over his personal...
By now, their creditors had written off £37,000. And they weren't alone. Specialist legal firms were winning with similar tactics.
We would say roughly about 1 in 4, 1 in 5 of the agreements we see have a problem with them. However, our agreements, the ones that we see, are often being filtered by other people. So it's about possibly 1 in 10.
So with that quantity you're talking about, they would get the loan written off, completely written off?
Yes, the existing loan could be written off.
People will find that extraordinary, I think. And would you say that's down to what? The drafting of a letter, a missing full stop, or something more substantial?
No, something more substantial than that. So it can be how the loan was sold, or indeed how charges have been put into the paperwork that essentially have been put in the wrong place, that kind of thing.
By now, the Rankines were so buoyed up, they went to the High Court to see if they could get their remaining debts written off. But the judge threw their case out, saying they were trying to wriggle out of their debts and branding them dishonest. But because they'd failed to claim their money back during the case, they can no longer do so. So it seems the Rankines lost the legal battle, but won the debt war.
So out of the £120,000 that you've borrowed, how much of that have you managed to get away with?
Get away with? That's a nice word. Part of it is written off by the lender. That means that there is no debt on their books, so that money is not owed. And part of it is the lender cannot take any further steps to recoup that money from us.
So how much have you avoided? Just give us a figure.
About 100,000.
You've avoided paying 100,000 out of 120.